do as a consultant. I really like working at OpenEdge. I like working at Roundtable. And currently, and also, I write a lot. And this is kind of the role that got me thinking about everything. I write computer science textbooks and courses for Jones and Bartlett. I also write PMP prep books. And I just finished the latest edition of a prep guide. And again, started thinking, well, Roundtable should fit in somehow. Because currently I'm working on a long-term project in Florida with a company down there, and they are an Agile shop. But they don't use Roundtable. They use Progress, but they kind of, well, their tools are really not very OpenEdge friendly. Honestly, they use TFS. I'm not saying that Microsoft Team Foundation Server is bad. I'm sure there is a positive way and an OpenEdge friendly way you can implement it. My customer didn't choose to do it that way. So I've introduced Roundtable and said, hey, guys, why don't we use this for little tiny areas, but boy, it'd be nice if we could use it in a bigger role. And so, as an integrator, because I kind of jump around a lot, I started wondering, is it possible for Roundtable to be Agile friendly? And of course, it was kind of, I really just thought about it now, I should have had the light bulb, because that's exactly what happened to me. And that's where the thought for this particular talk came from. So the answer, can Roundtable be Agile friendly, is pretty much the whole rest of the presentation. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what Agile is. Agile is a project methodology that originally derived from lean thinking. I didn't talk a lot about what lean thinking is, but the idea is we want to think about what we do professionally. What are the activities in which we engage, and which ones matter, which ones give us value back, and which ones don't. We're going to focus on the value-added activities and basically don't do the other stuff. That's kind of Agile in a nutshell. So the focus is on identifying and then managing 3 different types of work. Is this noise annoying to you guys? Okay. I almost dislocated my shoulder. Ah, that's why. I was going to close it earlier, but it's nice. All right. So 3 different types of work. First off, there's customer value-added work, which is the highest value work. This is work that you engage in, time you spend actually working on a deliverable. Now let's think about why you're in business. Whether you are a for-profit or not-for-profit organization, you are engaged in some sort of productive activity. This productive activity is to satisfy the needs of your customer. Your customers can be internal, they can be external, they can be paying you money, or they can just be part of the organizational structure. But regardless, everybody has a customer. So the idea is, to satisfy your customers, you have to give them some deliverable. Hopefully what they ask for is the goal. So any time that you spend on building a deliverable is customer value-added work. Now sometimes you have to engage in business value-added work, which are any activities that are necessary to maintain or conduct your business or perhaps achieve compliance. The company I work for is in the healthcare industry. Of course, we think healthcare, we think HIPAA, lots of HIPAA things. But there's also, is anybody else in the healthcare space? All right, well, what? I'm batting 1,000 on these questions. Well, one of the big things, too, and I won't spend any time on this, is ICD-9 versus ICD-10. Those are codes. Basically, if you've ever gotten a explanation of benefits for your insurance company, and there's all these millions of codes, it's like you're a 49.33/R43, or whatever. There are codes that basically talk about your diagnosis, the treatment regimen, and all kinds of things. Well, the coding entities have decided that the existing 7,500 codes, I may be way off on that, was not enough, so now there's 80,000. And we have to change our software to support the new. And the beauty of it is, it's not a one-to-many relationship. It's like one ICD-9 code may represent multiple ICD-10 codes, and then one new ICD-10 code may represent 4 or 5 old ICD-10. It's a many-to-many relationship. So anyway, we have to invest a lot of time in upgrading software to be able just to be compliant with federal regulations in that regard. And then lastly, we have checking your Facebook page, updating your status with a pithy new status today. Like, ooh, whatever. So that's non-value-added work. Anything that's wasted time or overhead of any type. So the idea, if you boil it all down, all Agile is trying to do is to basically say, put all your time into activities that have a positive return on investment. And don't do stuff that doesn't pay you back. That's basically it. The Agile Manifesto is a very simple document that was developed by a small group in a meeting that happened. I should have the dates actually when this happened, but it's a very small document. If you have Google or use your favorite search engine to look up the Agile Manifesto, it's a 1 or 2 page read, very, very small. Basically, Agile values individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Now, Agile recognizes that everything in the right-hand column has value, but the left-hand column should have more value and more emphasis as we develop and engage in our business processes. So the idea is we care about people more than just the tools we put into play. And if you're thinking ahead, you're going to say, well, the table's a tool, right? Yeah, it is. It's not the most important part of the puzzle, but it's an important part. Agile also values working software over comprehensive documentation. If you have the choice of one of your customers saying, yeah, here's software that works, we'll do what you want, or here is a book that describes what we're going to write for you at your goal level, obviously working software is better. Now, working software, by the way, should have some measure of documentation that is sufficient to empower the customer to use it. So don't say documentation is bad. You say software has more value than just documentation. Agile also values customer collaboration over contract negotiation. The idea here is that we want to engage with the customer throughout the entire process, as opposed to simply say, tell me what you want, and then we'll make sure that we use our legalese to give you what we want to and make you think that it's actually what you wanted in the first place. And by the way, if it wasn't perfect, it's not our fault. We have a contract. If the customer is involved, the customer will take ownership earlier in the process, and quite honestly, it's harder, although not impossible, it's harder for customers that are involved to complain quite so much. But doggone it, they still do, but at least you have something to stand on. And then lastly, Agile values responding to change over following a plan. How many times have you guys worked on projects where you have to do something stupid just because the plan says you have to do this today, but it adds no value? Agile basically says, let's respond to change as necessary. Okay, so the differences from the Waterfall Method, and this slide can be many slides. It's a very, very tiny summary. The idea of the Waterfall Method is very similar to what I mentioned. The Project Management Institute says the way to manage a project traditionally is that you do everything up front. You initiate the project, which basically gets authority and funding. Then we plan the project. And in fact, if you were to study the PMBOK, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, you will find that of the 47 processes, 24 or 26 of them are all on planning the project. In other words, you do that before the executing process group. So in the Waterfall Method, you plan everything up front. Now, I will also say that traditional project management does understand the concept of progressive elaboration, where you plan as much as you can, and then when you get into the execution and controlling, monitoring controlling phase, sometimes you blow out some more details because you learn as you go, and that's fine, but you still plan everything up front. All work has to conform to the plan. If it's not the plan, it is called gold plating. It is out of scope. We don't do anything that's not the plan. Even if it's a great idea, we're not going to do it. The activities are typically organized as linear processes, which means that developers finish their coding on a particular module, sometimes a very large module, and then they throw it over the fence to the QA folks, that throws it over the fence and moves downstream, and it's a very linear process. Now, we still see this linear mechanism in Agile, but it's a very short line, and it actually occurs simultaneously as a lot of other things are occurring. Activities organized over linear phase, and then the idea is we want to minimize variance from the plan. Plan is guide. Agile, or Scrum, we're going to use these terms intermittently. Agile is the philosophy. Scrum is an implementation. Effectively. Your work is only planned for each sprint. And sprints are typically 2 to 4 weeks. You can have longer sprints, but normally we recommend a sprint as a unit of a developer activity for about 2 to 4 weeks. The work is accomplished. The work accomplished determines the releases, not some arbitrary date. Yes, sir.
That's really the deal. Some threshold of completion that you showed, right?
I'm sorry.
Just kind of get that again. So it's some threshold of completion. The software is some threshold of completion. That determines the date.
Correct. Exactly, and that's a great clarification. You're absolutely correct. The threshold of completion of the product dictates the release date, not an artificial date that was planned at the beginning. Is that
right? Yeah, I would maybe I would take the word artificial off some date that was,
Good point. Yeah. Okay. So strike the artificial. So a date that was planned prior, and there are some very fine points. And I know that you guys, there's a few guys back there that are very active in Agile, and I encourage you to throw clarifications out. Yeah. This is a very high level. And there's,
yeah, that was your question. Right? But that I see it done. We're getting Agile. Those two things.
Yes. Yes. Oh yeah. Absolutely, and that's the difficulty. It's almost like, well, I don't have an appropriate analogy, but we see that over and over again. Every time I run into an Agile, there are Agile shops, and then there's a whole lot of Agile-ish shops. And a lot of people will say, yeah, we're Agile-ish. And the idea is they're just trying to increase the rate of iteration as opposed to embracing the Agile philosophy. It's a big philosophy change. If you're so used to driving to a date, it's a big philosophy change. Does that address your...
Yes.
Okay, and the sprints involve the entire team. Our teams are relatively small. It's typically 5 to 9. I will say ish there, because it can be a little bit larger, a little bit smaller, depending on your activities. And finally, adaptability that increases customer value is encouraged. But that, you take a traditional project manager, and you put that in front of him or her, and normally it's like, the first time it's like, this is bad, naughty, evil in the traditional project management world. This is called gold plating or scope creep. But the idea is that as you learn more about the product and you move forward and the customer becomes more and more engaged, as it makes sense and you can realize more return on your investment by making changes, it makes a whole lot more sense to change than to stay on a path that takes you farther off the final course. One example I'll go through this in. Again, once back to the aviation analogy. I don't think I have any more aviation analogies because they get a little tedious. Not to me, but if you're flying a small aircraft, a lot of you guys have probably seen or heard something about autopilot. You thought about what autopilot is? It's actually it can be really complex depending on how many axes you have. But bottom line, let's just look at an autopilot that does heading. It controls heading or it maintains heading. Effectively, if I take off from an airport anywhere around here, and I want to, let's say, I want to fly out to where Jeff lives. So I'm going to fly over to Southern California. Well, you don't just take off and point your nose there and just kick back. Because that's not going to work. Eventually what's going to happen is there'll be little winds that will go left and right at different points. Depending on what altitude you are, you'll be pushed off your course. And if you fly, especially if you do get your pilot's license and you're flying around, you're having lots of fun, the first few times you're not paying attention. You're paying attention, but not so much. You realize in a few minutes you can be a mile or two off. Actually, I did most of my flight training in Southern California, and I was flying one of my cross-country solos, and I asked for flight following through SoCal Approach, and they went, yeah, 757 Yankee X-ray, do you realize that you're in Miramar, in Camp Pendleton airspace? Oh, actually, I didn't pick up on that one. I actually just clicked it. It was before 9/11. It was not a big deal. I just turned it and got back out. The idea is, if you monitor, and that's what an autopilot does, it wasn't a big deal. If you monitor multiple times a second, that's all that an autopilot does, effectively. Basically says, here's where I'm supposed to be, am I on target? Am I on the right path, flight path? If I'm not, I'm going to make a real tiny flight correction. But if you don't only check once every 30 minutes, you can be miles and miles off, and you can make much larger flight corrections to get back on the path. That's the idea of Agile, is the ability to make many more small changes, adaptability, that does respond or does allow you to enjoy higher return on investment. Right. The goal is not to convince you that Agile is awesome. I'm probably doing too much, trying to do that a little bit too hard. But here's basically how Agile and Scrum kind of look from a picture standpoint. Scrum is an iterative and incremental Agile software development framework for managing product development. So when you hear Agile, in many cases, Scrum is actually what we're referring to. Agile is the philosophy. Scrum is the framework to implement Agile. There are other frameworks. Scrum is the most popular. Basically what happens is you start off with a product backlog. A product backlog is just a list of features, things that you want in the product. In many cases, they're expressed as user stories. We'll talk about that in just a minute. When you start a sprint, by the way, the product backlog, effectively the product owner, we'll talk about the roles in a minute, the product owner just takes all these guys and sorts them, high priority to low priority. And then you take the highest priority items off the product backlog, whatever you think you can finish in 2 weeks, that becomes your sprint backlog. That's your to-do list for your sprint. Then you iterate the sprint 2 to 4 weeks-ish, and you have a meeting at least once every 24 hours in general cases that results in a deliverable. So that's kind of like a picture of what Agile Scrum is all about. So the Scrum Elements, there's 3 components, or 3 primary Scrum Elements. There are roles, activities, and artifacts. The roles, primary roles in Scrum, would be the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the team members. We're going to talk about each of these individually in the next few slides. The activities, the stuff that actually happened, involve sprint planning, the daily Scrum, the daily meeting, sprint demo, and retrospective. And finally, the artifacts are the things that we either produce or we produce from, or that help us keep track of what we're doing, which would include the product backlog, the sprint backlog, again, feature lists, the burn down chart, I'll show an example of what that would look like, and the working product. And not every Scrum definition includes the working product as a Scrum artifact, and there's 2 different philosophies. Some look at it as the working product is the output or the result of Scrum, not an artifact of Scrum. But you can look at it either way. It is the result of a sprint. So the roles would include the product owner. The product owner is a subject matter expert. Should know what he or she is categorizing, prioritizing. The product owner defines and gathers all the requirements from the stakeholders. So there has to be some interaction there, going to the stakeholders, asking questions, understanding what the needs are, and then prioritizing those. And the priorities are always set at the beginning of every sprint, or at the end of the previous sprint, either way. And the product owner is responsible for return on investment, for making sure that there's a positive ROI for all activities. The Scrum Master is probably most similar, if you had to relate the Scrum Master to the traditional product manager, or project manager, but there's a lot of differences. The Scrum Master is effectively a coach and a gatekeeper. A coach in that he or she provides guidance and education to all the team members, making sure that they embrace the Scrum philosophy,